it's a positive that the rate of change of that list is slowing now as all of the countries that have been in the process of completing that process by the end of this year. And South Korea is intending to join. And indications at the moment are that the South Korean process may proceed reasonably rapidly. There are membership discussions ongoing with Japan, and we're in conversation with Poland, Ireland, Thailand, and some other countries about the possibility of joining. But those later ones are not yet in the process of joining SKA. So what are we building? Well, essentially, it's one observatory. We're building 2 telescopes, 2 arrays, that is, across 3 sites. The global headquarters of SKAO is at Jodrell Bank in the UK, and you can see the SKAO headquarters building here in the foreground of that image on the left of the screen. And with a construction cost of around 1.3 billion 2021 euros, we're building SKA Mid, the mid-frequency array in the Northern Cape of South Africa, and the SKA Low, the low-frequency array, in the Midwest region of Western Australia. SKAO is being built by radio astronomers, but it's very much for all astronomers. The aim of SKAO is to have the widest user base possible to maximise the science that's achieved and the scientific impact of the observatory. And to do that, it's critical that SKA data products are available to all astronomers. Astronomy is very much a panchromatic science these days. So just a little bit about the individual arrays. SKA Low in Australia. So this will comprise ultimately just over 131,000 low periodic antennas. Those antennas are arranged in 512 stations. The frequency coverage of SKA Low is from 50 to 350 megahertz. And the maximum distance between antenna stations, or the maximum baseline, is 74 kilometres. Just to give an idea of the scale of SKA Low, we're building 230 kilometres of access tracks, 670 kilometres of optical fibre cables, 325 kilometres of power cables to power all of the elements of the array. And there are 103,000 steel mesh sheets that make up the ground planes for each of the stations. And you can see the location of SKA Low there in the Midwest of Western Australia. There's an engineering operations centre not shown on this image, which is at Geraldton, basically the nearest town with reasonable services, somewhere between 350 and 400 kilometres from the site, and the Science Operations Centre, which is in Perth. SKA Mid in South Africa will be an array of 197 fully steerable parabolic dishes. That array will include the existing 64 dishes that make up the Meerkat telescope, which is a South African radio telescope, a precursor instrument for SKA Mid. The frequency range of SKA Mid is from 350 megahertz, so the upper limit of SKA Low, up to 15.4 gigahertz, and it can potentially go up to 30 gigahertz if a future upgrade is undertaken. Maximum distance between the dishes, 150 kilometres in this case. And again, you get a sense of the scale of the project from the various numbers at the last point there. SKA in some sense is defined not only by the physical scale, the number of antennas, the number of systems within it, but also by the data processing. The data volumes for SKA are enormous. 2 petabits per second coming off the antennas for SKA Low, and around 20 terabits per second from the antennas for SKA Mid. And that results in data flows of around about 8 to 9 terabits per second going into the science data processor. From the observatory then, we will produce data products which will be provided to a SKA regional centre network, so a global network of regional centres, and some 700 petabytes of data products per year will be delivered to the regional centre network. And it's through the regional centre network that astronomers will interact with SKA and analyse the data products and produce science from SKA data. So why are we building it? Well, the answer to that's very short. It's all about the science. This slide gives a sense of the different science working groups that essentially represent the different areas of science that SKA will target. These science working groups are groups of astronomers from around the world who have developed the science case for SKA. There are some 1,700 members in the SKA science working groups, and the science case is presented in the 2015 science book, Advancing Astrophysics with the Square Kilometre Array. That represents, there's 134 chapters in the science book, some 2,000 pages presenting the science case at that time. 2015 is obviously some time ago, and the science of astronomy has evolved substantially since then, as has the design of the telescope that will be delivered. There is an update of the SKA science book underway. That update will comprise 256 chapters. And if each of those chapters is at the full page count that's expected, it'll be 6,500 pages of the science case for SKA. Some of the big science questions that will be addressed by SKA presented here. I'm certainly not going to go through these, but you can get a sense from the topics that define the science working groups and these key science questions, what the breadth of the science targets of SKA are. This is very much a multi-purpose observatory for understanding the universe, absolutely not an instrument for doing a particular scientific project. So a very broad range of fundamental science. Just one of those involves the detection of the stochastic background of gravitational waves. And this is an area of science which is evolving very, very rapidly. And we're now seeing the first really good evidence for gravitational waves. And that's one of the very exciting areas of science that SKA will address through the two arrays. We've just very recently had an SKA science meeting, which took place at Görlitz in eastern Germany. This is an image of the theatre, the main location for that SKA science meeting. There were 500 in-person attendees at that science meeting, and some 200 virtual participants in the sessions for the week. And one thing that was really notable and was fantastic to see was that the audience was largely the next generation of astronomers who will actually use this observatory and these two arrays. And it was fantastic to see that, to see the energy, to see the enthusiasm, and in some sense, although as the Director of Operations I'd rather not, but to see the frustration that it's taking us so long to build this observatory. But it is genuinely a very significant undertaking to produce this. In a summary slide at the end of the meeting, the new SKAO Chief Scientist, Naomi McClure-Griffiths, showed this slide, which was just some of the most exciting topics that had been discussed during the week of this science meeting. And so just to repeat, why are we building it? It's about the science. But there are also lots of other impacts which are incredibly important when you're spending 2 billion euros of 12 to 13 government funds on an undertaking like this. And that's the spend over the first 10 years of SKAO. So there's a lot of attention being paid to wider impacts, and in particular, local impacts. So we're very proud of our partnership with the Wajiri Yamaji the Indigenous owners of the site of SKA Low in Australia, and local communities of both SKA Low and SKA Mid. Respect for the land is very much an integral part of SKA's activities, and there are very strict and significant environmental processes involved, and heritage monitors on site throughout all groundbreaking activities associated with the construction, particularly of SKA Low. SKA provides substantial skills training and employment opportunities for hundreds of local people employed across both the low and the mid sites. And we're also, together with our partners in Australia and in South Africa, investing in local facilities and local activities, including, for example, early childhood development centres. Global impacts of SKA are also significant. Sustainability is a core consideration for the observatory, and we're very focused on reducing, to the extent that is possible, the power usage of the observatory, and at the same time seeking to optimise the use of power that's generated from renewable sources. That's something that we are constantly reminded of by our stakeholders. We are involved in and driving technology innovations throughout the engineering elements of delivering these complex systems for SKA, and in particular, the challenges that are associated with dealing with big data is driving innovation in a variety of ways. We're contributing to substantial global industry involvement through the contracting process, the very many organisations and companies that are involved in delivering on SKA. And we will follow open science principles. Data from SKA will be public after a suitable proprietary period. And we're also very concerned and actively engaged in the sustainability of quiet skies and the associated dark skies required in order to be able to do optical astronomy, in the same way that quiet skies are required in order to be able to do radio astronomy now and into the future. And that's a very active area of engagement for SKA. So what about the process of actually establishing the observatory? So it's been a 35-year journey so far, starting in 1990 when the big ideas coalesced. In the 1990s, the science case for SKA evolved, resulting in the SKA science book that I talked about earlier. In the 2000s, the early technology exploration, essentially took place with the development of precursor telescopes, with MEERKAT, ASCAP, the Australian SKA Pathfinder, MWA and HERA, or precursor telescopes. In 2012, the SKAO's precursor organisation, the SKA organisation, was established. That's a company that was established in the UK for the early stages of the development of SKA. And in particular, that drove the detailed design. And in 2021, the SKA Observatory, the intergovernmental organisation, was created by international treaty. And somewhat embarrassingly, SKAO has been going for so long that the first history book has been published before the observatory has actually been built. And so the book, SKA Kilometre Array, Science Mega Project in the Making, by Richard Scalizzi and fellow authors, including Ron Eckers, who's here today, has been published recently. And I commend that to those of you that are interested in just how complex and how drawn out the process of doing something on this sort of scale is. In terms of the SKA Observatory, it was born in February 2021 when the intergovernmental organisation came into being. In June 2021, the SKAO Council approved the start of construction of the SKAO, and the two sort of foundation documents, the SKA Phase 1 construction proposal and the Observatory Establishment and Delivery Plan, which outline the activities of SKAO for the first decade. On the 5th of December 2022, we held the two construction commencement ceremonies for SKA Low and SKA Mid. As of today, we are roughly 50% of the way through the construction of the observatory. More than 100 contracts have been awarded. Just under 900,000 2021 euros of funds have been committed to those contracts as of today. And there are roughly 360 staff working across the UK, Australia and South Africa to deliver the observatory. I want to move on and give a sense of the construction status. So where are we actually up to? What are we delivering? Well, essentially, the structure in Australia and in South Africa is somewhat similar. There's a large number of antennas which will feed data through processing facilities into science operations centres. The Science Operations Centre for SKA Low is in Perth. Science Operations Centre for SKA Mid is in Cape Town. There are science processing centres where the supercomputers that will actually produce the data products, which are the outputs from the observatory, also in Perth and Cape Town respectively. And then sitting alongside the SKA Observatory, but not formally part of the observatory and not under our control, are the SKA regional centres, which I've already mentioned, and I'll say a little bit more about that later on. The construction strategy, the target of the observatory and of all of the member countries, is to build the SKA design baseline. That's the 197 mid dishes and the 512 low stations. And internally, we refer to that as Array Assembly 4. So the design baseline, or baseline design, and AA4 are synonyms. They're the same thing. However, not all the funding that is necessary in order to deliver on the baseline design has been secured. And as a result of that, we're following what's called a staged delivery plan. And that staged delivery plan will result in us delivering what is called AA star, or Array Assembly star. The strategy is to develop the earliest possible working demonstration of the architecture and the data supply chain for each of SKA Low and SKA Mid. And that first step is called AA 0.5. That's the first working array. So there's an SKA Low AA 0.5 and an SKA Mid AA 0.5. And from that point on, we will maintain a continuously working and expanding facility through Array Assembly 1, Array Assembly 2, and up to AA star, in order to demonstrate the capabilities of the SKA baseline design. And hopefully we will then continue from AA star to deliver AA4, which is the baseline design. The first data release to the community is expected in 2027. That will be data aimed at the science verification of the early stages of SKA, not the scientific data in response to proposals. So what is AA star? I'm not going to go through this slide in any detail, but the slides will be available afterwards. So for SKA Low, essentially 307 of the antenna stations will aim to be delivered. And you can see the other statistics here for SKA Low. And for SKA Mid, AA star comprises 144 antennas, including the Meerkat and Meerkat Plus antennas. Who's involved in SKA Low? Well, there is involvement from Australia, China, India, Italy, the Netherlands, Spain, Switzerland, and the UK in the construction of SKA Low. And you can see that many institutions and companies that are working very hard to deliver SKA Low through their logos on this slide. I won't go through the specifics, but an absolutely key partner in SKA Low in Australia is CSIRO, which is working on a range of the construction deliverables and is a key partner in the operations of SKA Low. In SKA Mid, it's Australia, Canada, China, Germany, Italy, South Africa, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, and the UK. And again, a wide range of institutions and companies. And the key partner for SKAO in South Africa is the South African Radio Astronomy Observatory, which we tend to refer to as SARAO, which is a key partner in many of the construction elements, but also in the operation of SKA Mid. In computing software and networks, there's 9 countries directly involved in the building of SKA software suite, resources coming in from some 30 suppliers around the world, and some 160 key personnel who are part of the process of building SKA's software. The construction program currently is absolutely focused on delivering AA 0.5 for both of the telescopes. We're at a stage now where the nature of the program risk is switching somewhat from infrastructure-related risks to technical risks and system integration. And there are many external dependencies that arise from host country deliverables. There are various elements that are the responsibility of Australia and of South Africa, the telescope host countries, to provide for SKAO. And so there's an evolution of risk associated with just the stage that we're at in the construction project. And we're very much focused on evolving and growing the collaboration with those key partners that I've already mentioned, CSIRO and SARAO. You can get another sense of the scale of the construction project from various numbers here. So I've already said 100 contracts have been awarded. There are some 187 work packages that are actively being managed. And you can see the number of internal activities that are involved in just managing the project in the numbers on this slide. And over the next few slides, I'll try and give a sense of, again, the scale of the project. So where are we at with SKA Low? AA 0.5 is working. It's a working array of 4 stations controlled by SKA software, which is deployed on SKA computers, which are hosted in the Science Processing Centre in Perth. Just over the last 2 weeks, we've declared SKA Low AA 0.5 complete. And so we're now moving into the AA1, Array Assembly 1 stage of SKA Low. We've built some 84% of the access tracks that are required for SKA Low. Some 60% of the steel mesh for the ground planes has been installed, and up for 235 stations. All of the central processing facility modules have been delivered, and the remote processing facilities modules are on site for SKA Low. More than 5,000 antennas have been built and assembled and built and deployed on the site. That number changes daily. I'm not sure what the number is today, but that was the right number when I last looked at this slide. And some 19,000 antennas for SKA Low have been manufactured. And the integration and test facility is fully operational in Geraldton. And you can see various images there of activities. For SKA Mid, we're not as advanced in the construction project. 4 of the dish pedestals are complete, and 3 of what are called the big lifts, where we lift the reflector structure onto the pedestals and mount those reflectors on the pedestals. 3 of those have been completed. And there are 3 further dish structures on the SKA Mid site. All of the major dish subsystems for AA 0.5 are available. And in terms of the feeds for the 3 receiver bands, for band 1, the pre-production units are under construction. For band 2, the construction of feeds is well advanced. And for band 5, contracts have been awarded. And the feed controller systems have been completed for the various feeds for SKA Mid. In terms of infrastructure, the specialised low-frequency digital mobile radio system, which is required for communications not only for the operation of the observatory, but also for the pastoralists that operate in the region, is complete. It's a special low-frequency system operating well out of the band of SKA Mid to minimise any interference with the astronomy activities. Nearly 70% of roads have been completed, and just over half of the foundations for the antennas have been completed. And you can see almost 60% of underground optical fibre distribution is in place, and around about 20% of the overhead fibre lines are complete. And an integration and test facility with a 4-receptor system running SKA software is in place and operating in Cape Town. Because of where we are in the project and the arrival of a new director of programs towards the end of last year, Stuart Whitley, who's the co-author of this presentation, we've been undertaking a pragmatic review of progress and of future delivery of SKA, in particular the delivery of the construction program. And that review has revealed that we have some very significant schedule challenges. As a result of that, we have extended the schedule for SKA Mid by 27 months to reflect both delays and the necessary addition of schedule contingency towards the end of the construction program. And we've extended the schedule for SKA Low by 12 months, building in additional contingency that we believe is necessary. That doesn't reflect delays in the construction program to date, but it does represent an additional schedule contingency. The schedules that I'll show after this already include those increases in the schedule. So don't add these to the end of the schedules that I'm showing today. But those are new changes to the schedule, which is why we're highlighting that. The realities of building 2 of the most complex scientific instruments on Earth are many. But one of the key things is that in some sense it's all about people. As I've already said, there are some 360 staff involved in SKAO across the 3 countries. In terms of contractors in South Africa, there are some 500 people currently working on the delivery of SKA Mid, and that includes about 300 people employed from the local communities where SKA Mid is being built. There are some 300 contractors in Australia, including 45 of the Wodjiri community in the local area, and other Indigenous people that are involved in SKA Mid. And so much of the management, many of the challenges, but also many of the solutions come from the people involved in SKAO. And just a series of pictures of various groups over activities that have taken place over the last few months involved in SKAO. But it genuinely has its challenges. SKA Mid is being constructed with many of the antennas in the core of an operating radio telescope of extraordinary sensitivity, and construction is necessarily a disruptive activity. Building foundations, building antennas on this sort of scale interrupts meerkat science, and so there are many challenges associated with that. You get an idea of just how close to SKA mid, to meerkat antennas, SKA mid activities are in this image. You can see a meerkat antenna, which is pretty much right next to drilling for the pilings for the foundations of an SKA mid antenna. Soreo and SKAO are having to undertake maintenance activities on meerkat antennas because of the dust from the construction of SKA mid affecting the drive systems on meerkat antennas. You can't read this yet, but this is a thermometer on the SKA low site, and trust me when we show you that the wet bulb temperature of this thermometer on a particular day, I think this was last summer, was just above 56 degrees. These are very challenging environments in which to undertake these sorts of activities. Trenching on a good day at the SKA low site, the trenching machines responsible for building the trenches for the power and fibre distribution systems can achieve 1 kilometre a day. On a bad day, in an area where there's rock, that can drop to as little as 12 metres a day. As you can imagine, we don't always know what you're going to find for every metre of the trenching that's involved in a project of this scale. So there are very significant challenges and unknowns associated, not only with the high-tech parts of these activities, but also with some of the basic infrastructure. And of course, those of you that might have been involved in building large observatories know that they're the best way to get generation changing rains in remote and dry sites. And rain at these sorts of sites can cause very significant disruptions to construction-related activities, making even the most basic activities very challenging when you have infrastructure that is essentially unsealed and even uncompacted access tracks. And not only at the SKA low site, but also at the SKA mid site. 1 in 100-year rain events seem to follow the start of construction of these sorts of activities. We keep trying to tell ourselves that if it was easy, it'd hardly be worth doing, but I don't think any of us would mind if it was a bit easier than it seems to be. The path to SKA science then, what we're really aiming to deliver, in some sense, is summarised in this slide, which was produced specifically for the Görlitz meeting. So this is the current state of affairs for SKA low. You can see the top timeline here, and for SKA mid, the lower timeline. We are aiming to begin principal investigator-driven science projects using the AA* array for SKA low in 2030 and for SKA mid in 2032. So there's roughly a 2-year difference in the timeline now between the two different arrays. We are very much in the commissioning stage of SKA low and essentially moving into the early commissioning stage for SKA mid. And I've already mentioned the science verification stage, when the first data will be released for review by the science community, as opposed to for science by the science community, expected to take place in 2027 for low and 2029 for mid. We are hopeful that some science will come from science verification, but that's not the principal target of a science verification data and data release. And for those of you that are interested, there will be an opportunity to provide suggestions for science verification targets roughly 6 months before we anticipate starting science verification. So that's not terribly far away, mid-2026 for SKA low. The more detailed scientific timeline summarised on this slide, I won't go through this. I've already talked about when we expect cycle 0, so that first cycle of calls for proposals and observing for PI-driven science for the two instruments, and we expect to follow an annual cycle of calls for science proposals for the two instruments. The expected modes available for early science verification: continuum mode for SKA low and continuum and pulsar timing modes for SKA mid. And there are some other modes that may be available, but those are lower priority at the moment. And it's important to recognise that modes will only be available for science verification once we believe that we've successfully completed commissioning of those modes. In some sense, science verification is the next stage. We think it's working. You tell us whether you think it's working. The cycle zero capabilities summarised on this slide. Again, I'm absolutely not going to go through the details there, but they are there for those of you that are very keen to find out what we are expecting to be able to deliver. And I've already said this a couple of times, so I won't go through it again in terms of when the first data will be available, when cycle zero is expected to start. But the links here may well be relevant to those of you that are keen to get your hands on SKA data, or to participate more actively in SKA, or to find more information that I'm able to give in a summary talk like this. There's a set of very up-to-date questions and answers that have been driven by input through the Görlitz Science meeting at the first of these links. And there are updates and opportunity for feedback from the scientific community at the second of these links. So please follow up, go to those links if you're interested in engaging further. So I want to say a little bit about the SKA Regional Centre Network, which is the mechanism by which astronomers will access and analyse SKA data. So this is a federated global network of regional centres that will provide user data to scientists. It will host the SKA Science Archive, and it will support the scientific community. And as I've said, it will receive, curate and make available these 700 petabytes or so of SKAO science data products for use by astronomers. And you can get a sense of the distribution, if you will, of regional centre activities from this slide. The project to develop the regional centre network is a self-organised collaboration between SKAO countries. I've said before, it doesn't actually fall under the control of the observatory. It's the same countries that are involved in this activity, but in some sense it sits alongside and is a less formal structure than the observatory. The aim of the project is to deliver the working network for science verification. That's when it will really come into operation, and for the start of SKAO science operations. There are currently 53 full-time equivalent, mainly software developers, working on developing the tools, the systems, the protocols for these services to support SKA astronomers. And that is alongside and in addition to the development of SKA core software, which is under the control of the observatory that I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of detail on this slide about the regional centre network, but a couple of critical elements that I just want to draw attention to. There will be one globally federated SRC network. For the astronomers that will use SKAO, it's largely irrelevant that that network will be made up of individual SKA regional centres in some or all or most SKA countries. It'll be one network. You'll come into it through one common portal. You'll have one set of credentials to undertake any SKA-related activity, whether it's proposing for SKA science, getting access to your data if you're an investigator on an SKA project, analysing that data. So it's a common science gateway to enter into a system. It will provide access to data, and it will also provide computing and visualisation resources for analysing SKA data. And there are four core federating concepts for the SRC net. So a common gateway, federated identity management, federated global archive of SKA data, and federated execution of workflows. So a common set of tools. Again, doesn't matter where you come in, doesn't matter where data for individual projects are stored, doesn't matter where the compute resources that are most suited to each job, if you like, are located. From a user perspective, it's one network. The SRC net timeline is such that the first version of a network is up and operating, but that is internal only. So the so-called SRC net 0.1 came into being just a few months ago. There are 8 individual nodes and one more in testing phase that are part of that, and test campaigns are underway. This is essentially testing those concepts, testing the ability to manage and transfer data, testing the ability to authenticate users, and so on. Pardon me. And this will proceed through a series of steps: SRC net 0.2, SRC net 0.3, due in Q4 2026, which will be an integral part of science verification. So science verification data will be made available through the SRC network, through version 0.3. And that's the first system that will support external users. And then SRC net 1.0, which is the essentially fully functioning version, which is needed for the start of PI-driven science on that timeline that I've already talked about. So a bit more about SRC net 0.1. It's absolutely internal to the project. You can't see this. You have to take our word for it that it is operating. There have already been millions of global data transfers made in test campaigns using this early network. There's already a centrally managed data archive of 3 petabytes. There's ingestion of SKA data that's already being made through essentially an SDP site in the Pawsey Supercomputing Centre in Western Australia, and the necessary protocols for trust between the sites that are participating in this early version are already being established and tested. And in terms of those federating concepts, 3 of these have been tested and demonstrated, and the 4th one, work on that is still underway. So it's gratifying to see the progress that's being made on SRCnet, because this is absolutely fundamental to our ability to deliver the science verification data to the community, which is coming scarily soon for those of us that are responsible on the observatory side. So I just want to wrap up with a few images of sort of fairly random selection of recent news that appealed to me. The first one of these is that there are very prosaic activities involved in projects like this that take a huge amount of time and resources. One of those is simply figuring out exactly where each antenna for SKA low needs to be installed on the ground plane. And you can imagine that the process of walking around and putting a dot on the ground plane to mark where each of 256 antennas needs to be placed is a process that takes a lot of people time, if you like. That's now being done very much more efficiently using a differential GPS referenced robot, which trundles around on the ground plane and marks the location for each antenna. And then humans come along, wheel each antenna out, fix it onto the ground plane, and install those antennas. It's really great to see that sort of efficiency being introduced into the activity as we're sort of learning how to roll out, how to scale up the activities of SKA. And it is a huge scale up that is required in order to deliver. The SKA Low Central Processing Facility is a massive building. It's an incredibly complex undertaking. 21 individual modules have been manufactured, delivered to the site, located next to each other, and some 2.2 kilometres of pressure vessel quality welding has been required to weld those 21 containers together in order to produce a radio frequency tight Faraday cage for the central processing facility at the SKA Observatory site. Let me just repeat the 2.2 kilometres of continuous welding that's required. I think there were 21 welders responsible for this. 21, no, that's the number of modules. More than 20 welders were responsible for this activity, and that's undergoing testing at the moment. Some minor flaws in the welds are being discovered, and that's already been fixed. There are some extremely complex welds involved in making this radio frequency tight. There are 86,000 fibres that have to enter the central processing facility through waveguide beyond cut-off ports. Just organising those fibres and installing them through the ports into the building is very complex. You can see the cable pit. You can see the process of organising fibres. They're bundled together. I think it's 12 fibres per bundle goes through these waveguide beyond cut-off ports into the building. The construction workers camp for SKA Mid has some 250 beds. Again, gives you a sense of the scale of the facility. The construction camp for SKA Low is a bit smaller, 176 beds, I think, but that has been essentially 100% full every weeknight. So big undertaking to deliver these facilities, and get a sense of the remoteness and the fact that you have to have your own soccer pitch because there are people who are located there living on the site to deliver these activities. Radio quietness is a real challenge in building a facility. SKA Mid's being built in the middle of a working radio telescope. We have just recently sourced 3 25-year-old cranes from the Netherlands, shipped them to South Africa specifically for undertaking the lifts of the reflector structures onto the pedestals in the core of SKA Mid, because 25-year-old cranes have far less electronics, far fewer Bluetooth connected devices as part of the control system, and therefore are far quieter and don't interfere with their ongoing meerkat science to the same extent. A very exciting result from SKA Mid. I showed the first Sky Spectrum, which didn't demonstrate anything other than the fact that we had a receiver system which has a passband. But on the, I can't remember when this was, roughly 2 weeks ago, we got the first real spectrum through an SKA Mid antenna. Almost all of the features that you can see on these spectra are noise. They're radio frequency interference from mobile phones, from satellite systems, GPS systems, and the like. But there is a neutral hydrogen detection that you can see there at roughly 1420 megahertz, which indicates that we can do astronomy with an SKA Mid antenna. This is from the first SKA Mid dish that, as I said, literally just a couple of weeks ago. Very exciting. And there's also a hint of galactic synchrotron in the spectrum there as well. With a parked antenna, not able to be driven, but we can observe the galaxy passing overhead, and these 3 spectra show different parts of our galaxy as it passes overhead of the antenna. We can compare that to a Bond survey of our galaxy, and you can see the correspondence between the SKA spectrum from that first antenna in red and the lab survey spectrum in the dashed black line there, and you can see the comparison. So we really are seeing the galaxy as it passes overhead of SKA Mid. Sorry. So in summary, I hope you've got the sense that construction activities are proceeding at pace. The reality is that the schedule is under pressure, especially for SKA Mid. We think we're on top of that. We have extended the schedule for SKA mid. We've added contingency into both the mid and the low schedule, and we think we are in control of that. And you've seen what the schedules look like and what we believe we can deliver the observatory to. The science delivery timeline has been updated. Commissioning is absolutely underway, and the science operations teams are preparing for the first release of science verification data coming up in 2027. The first, admittedly very primitive, SKA low image has been released. The first very primitive SKA mid spectrum has been obtained, which gives us some comfort that at least parts of the system for mid are working. Just a reminder, it's from a single dish, stowed, not driven. We're walking first. We've got a long way to go. But after a 35-year journey, SKA science is finally on the near horizon. And so I think we are genuinely witnessing the birth of the SKA Observatory. And so just to finish then, that together with our partners, we are engaged in one of the greatest scientific endeavours of the 21st century. It's really exciting, and there's a lot more to come. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Lewis, for this overview of this hugely impressive efforts. I can imagine there are some questions, so I would like to open the floor for that. Yes, please. Let's start now over there.
What is the expected price on the overall project?
The expected price of the project. So 1.3 billion, well, depends on whether we're talking about the project itself. Let's say 1.5 billion.
For the voltage?
Yes.
So,
great to see all the progress is being made, but eventually you said that MID is going to have MeerKAT incorporated into it.
Yes.
I did not see whether that timeline is going to happen. Is it independent until the end and then incorporated, or?
It's still something that we're very actively working through. Sorry, I should stand on the microphone. It's something that we're still very actively working through, and will continue to work through with SKA, which is operating MeerKAT. From memory, it happens now following the AA2 stage for SKA mid. So it's at least 2 or 3 years further into the future. What we are hoping to do is to follow a path which will allow SKA mid to operate in true mid mode, but also to be able to operate the MeerKAT antennas in a MeerKAT mode, so what we're calling digital splitting, for some period of time to ease that transition and to maximise the scientific productivity. But that is a work in progress. There's no guarantee that we can do that yet. We're working on that hard now.
so another question over there. Yes, please go ahead.
So on the SRC net, I didn't realize that that was managed by SKAO. And it being the way to get data out of the telescope, how does SKAO characterize the risk associated with the entry point not being under your control?
Significant. It's not a choice that I would make as Director of Operations. It's a decision that was taken back in 2019, I think, from memory, 2016 even. And so it is a very significant issue for the observatory, and all of the member countries also recognise the risk associated with that. But that is where we are today. And so I tried to give the sort of realistic representation of that it's not under SKA control, but the observatory is very much an integral part of the project and of the activity, and it's something that is constantly considered at the SKAO Council, which is the mechanism by which the member countries come together with the observatory to manage risk.
Okay, one final questions. Let's go over there.
Yeah, just wondering about our government support, whether you get good government support from the various levels of government.
We get excellent government support, but it's complex. And if you can imagine the process of working with 12 or more in reality, governments and government representatives, every country has its own processes, every country has its own budgetary cycle, and so on. It is incredibly complex, possibly more complex than any other science organisation because of the way that SKAO has been established. There are very limited sort of rules that govern the relative fractions in which different countries come in. So it's complex and challenging. And I realise that's a bit of a theme of this presentation. It is incredibly challenging, but the countries that are involved in SKA are very much committed to it, but trying to bring all of those participants together in a structured way at the same time as you have what I think I've given you a sense of is one, perhaps it's better to represent as two massive freight trains that are proceeding at pace. That's really difficult.
Okay, I'm sure there are very many more questions, so please look up Lewis when you see him over the coffee break or lunch break. Thank you all for joining, and let's thank Lewis again for his very nice job.
Yeah.